Join me as I sit down with Will Webb, a former Green Beret and West Point graduate, as we discuss the work he's doing with Heroic Hearts, a company aimed at supporting psychedelic treatment options to veterans suffering from PTSD and other mental health-related conditions.
Jesse Gould started it 2017. He's an Army Ranger and went through kind of a similar healing trajectory, found his way down to Peru at some point and tried ayahuasca, and then realized like every veteran needs to try this. Since 2017, Heroic Hearts has sent over 1,500 veterans on retreats to mostly Peru and Mexico and now Portland, Oregon. So to navigate the legal landscape, it's completely above water. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, and they operate in countries where plant medicine is legal.
We'll also be discussing the mental health crisis in America and its effects on veterans and issues with vets getting access to care through the VA healthcare system.
Veterans make up around 15% of total suicides a year, and we represent less than 1% of the population. And so there's a huge disparity amongst our population that represents the total number of suicides.
In my own personal experience with the VA out here, I just needed to do therapy. I needed to do like 24 sessions of therapy in order to graduate to be a therapist, right? It makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was going to do it through the VA to get it for free. And I called in January and they were like, okay, the earliest we could get you in with a mental health care professional would be June. And I was like, okay, it's like not bad, 5-6 months. And then they called in May and they were like, hey, we're booked. Can you do August? So if I was struggling and I needed mental health treatment and needed a therapist and I went in January, I wouldn't be treated till August.
Will and I will also be discussing Will's journey from the Army to becoming a therapist, the benefits of other somatic practices such as breathwork, sound baths, yoga, and much more. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Before we get started, if you could hit the like, subscribe, or follow button on whichever platform you're consuming today's show.
So Will, what are you working on at the moment and why are you so excited about it?
Thanks, Dan. I'm mostly working on grad school. I'm excited about it. I'm starting my third quarter at Antioch University in LA, and it's a master's in clinical psychology to be a therapist.
Nice.
So, yeah, I'm stoked. This term will be really cool classes. I'm doing like a field study where you just go around town and learn about cultures and things that you don't know about. Doing transpersonal psychology, which like dips into the Eastern meditation philosophy. My school's very like into the spirituality and Carl Jung kind of psychology stuff. And then I'm doing group therapy and couples therapy. So this term, I feel like I'm getting into the meat and potatoes of the whole operation, and it's awesome. And then in addition to that, I coach. So integration coaching mostly with Heroic Hearts Project. I do my own privately too. Like I'll do one-on-ones with people. And then I've just been finding things that I personally enjoy for regulating my own nervous system. So whether it's like surf lessons or yoga or sound healing, I like to incorporate those in as well. Because like no one thing is like the cure-all for people, but
Right.
having like a bunch of different options, a bunch of different modalities is where it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we've talked a lot about, the sound healing piece, yoga, breath work, certainly the work you're doing with Heroic Hearts. And you just said some things that are actually, new to me too, that I do want to dive into, because actually on the last episode, the guest I spoke with, we talked a little bit about Carl Jung in particular. And
Oh, sick.
yeah, I think even given just the silent retreat I just did, you just mentioned some of the mindfulness piece or the meditative work you're doing as part of your current program, all the stuff that I want to dive into. But
yeah,
I know this current program you're in, your master's program, isn't your first forte into kind of the mental health space. You mentioned you're doing integration currently at the moment. I think you've done a program previously to help with counseling piece of things.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your genesis of kind of entering into this space, how it came about for you and why it's so personally important for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I was in the Army for like almost 10 years and loved it, loved the mission. And like my favorite part of being in the military was just connecting with people, like my soldiers, the Afghans that I worked with, helping the families. And there were moments where like I was able to just lend an ear and listen and help people through challenging times, whether it was like a loss of a loved one or, dealing with their own marriage difficulties or like people with their own mental health challenges. So as I got injured and then was really only treating my body and doing physical therapy and had like never been to therapy and started going after I got back from Afghanistan in 2021. Kind of hit a breaking point with like all of that going on with the retrograde, got injured. It was like a back, neck, brain injury combo from just an airborne jump, like standard, too windy, and we just burned it into the ground. And so I don't know, just trying to fix myself. Like I had migraines every day and was just in a terrible mood and had like invasive thoughts of suicide, but never like any action, but just couldn't, shake it. And then was, just like later diagnosed with stuff, mental health stuff. But when I got out, I was kind of just like really interested in like startups and mental health and whatever. And so I was just kind of figuring it out. Like had no real idea. But I think the big catalyst was going on the retreat to Peru and doing that like 5 ceremonies with ayahuasca. That for me, like when I came back, because I went down with the intention of exploring like my childhood, my military service, and deciding what to do for the next chapter of my life professionally. And after that, I came back and was like, wow, I just saw like a bird's eye view of my whole life from start to finish and realized how incredibly privileged I am and also how short life is. And I came back and was like, I don't want to work in this corporate job anymore. I was doing fintech. It was great pay, super easy. It was really fun. Like I love my team, but it was just felt like a little worker bee in a beehive, just chugging away. Yeah. And I was like, I'm not alive. Like I'm not aligned with my truth and my passion. So it took a long time to kind of like narrow into it. And initially I was thinking start a business or do an MBA and do something mental health related. And then I was like, you know what? Like, why don't I just play to my strengths? I'm good at talking to people. I'm empathic. I can just listen. So there's therapy is like a great option. Yeah. And I think also what pushed me in that direction was when I came back from Peru, I immediately kind of like put some feelers out to different nonprofits about working for them. And I was thinking like management or like ops, like, military veteran stuff.
Yeah, the project management stuff.
Yeah. And everyone was like, we don't have that. Like, so Heroic Arts was like, you could be a coach. Like, just go through the 6-month coaching course to become a psychedelic integration coach. And then you can be a coach. I was like, all right, yes. And then concurrently with that, my other friend, Will, who went on the Peru retreat, worked for Fireside Project, which is another nonprofit that holds space for people remotely. So if you are journeying on a psychedelic substance or want to integrate from a past trip that you had, you can call this call line. It's open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific. And it's staffed by a bunch of volunteers. And we get trained, so I did that for like a year. And you get trained on how to just hold space, just reflecting back what people say, being present, asking open-ended questions. It's all the same like therapy tools that like I'm learning in grad school now and practicing in coaching. But it was awesome. I mean, it was like priceless to just like have so many conversations over the course of the year with people that were like in the middle of a challenging psychedelic journey and just needed someone to remind them that it's okay. They're doing great. Just breathe, and learned how to like guide people through grounding techniques or guide people through simple breath work like box breathing or alternate nostril breathing. And I loved it. I mean, it's draining because you realize like how sticky people's energy is. Like when you start to talk to a lot of people that are going through it, you have to like ground and clear the air afterwards and like really be aggressive about maintaining your own self-care. So that was a huge lesson learned. Because you can't just like hold space on a call line for 4 hours and then just jump into traffic on like rush hour or like do something stressful. You kind of have to like decompress.
For sure.
But yeah, all of that, like it was just kind of building until I got to the point where I was like, okay, grad school, awesome. And start my own coaching LLC and take on clients. And now I'm just, kind of just doing whatever feels right. Like kind of figuring it out as I go. But like long-term vision would be have a retreat center somewhere, take people surfing, teach yoga, bring in people like you to implement breath work, and then somewhere in the mix do plant medicine if it's in a place where it's legal. So like Peru would be great, Costa Rica, Colombia, maybe somewhere in California in the future. Be awesome.
Yeah.
But
we talked a little bit about Colorado opening up some aspects of psychedelic treatment or having that be a legal means. And then also I think Oregon too is on that path, if not already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But man, you mentioned a lot there. And I, first want to say for the viewers who are, maybe listening to the earlier part about your injury history, certainly not so standard stuff for probably most of the people listening, but you talk about your journey and experience through the military with the head back injury. Can you talk about a little bit more the types and styles of treatment you're receiving through the military and like what you found was ineffective with some of the modes of treatment you were initially receiving for the physical side and also the mental side of things?
Yeah. I went in and initially, they were like, okay, just rest. Like, had like several head injuries at this point in the military. And so they're kind of compounding. Fort Bragg has a Intrepid Spirit Center. So I ended up going there for this stuff and it's all about brain injury stuff. So that was cool. And they tried a bunch of different things, like bunch of different medications. They tried Botox to the face because they think it like relaxes your muscles. And I don't know if it really did anything for me. Physical therapy, pain management. I was seeing a therapist at the embedded behavioral health facility at Third Group. And it was all okay, but it wasn't good. The only couple things that they started throwing at the end that I found really helpful were they like prescribed me to do yoga 3 times a week at the Intrepid Spirit Center. And it was amazing. They had an awesome yoga teacher. And then because I was getting medically retired at that point, the hospital like allowed me to get prescribed Marinol, which is Delta 9 THC. It's like lab synthesized THC. And they were like, yeah, just take it for migraines and to go to sleep. I was like, dude, like, why didn't you guys start with this?
Yeah.
Like cannabis is such a medicine and yoga is so awesome because it treats your mind, your body, and your spirit. You can't just treat the symptoms of your body, you have to do something that works on all 3. So yeah, I really like loved that and was so grateful for it. Both of those things, the cannabis and the yoga. And then that's kind of how I as I went into like the corporate world, I relocated, moved to Charlotte. And I was like, man, I'm just going to keep doing yoga. I started doing it as I was training up for selection, like back in 2017. But got more serious about it to the point where like now, like last year, I did like a 200-hour yoga teacher training and like love to teach yoga on retreats now and out on the beach and at different things here.
Yeah. So it sounds like initially when it was treating things or symptoms in isolation or as separate compartments, we'll say.
Yeah.
It wasn't until you really connected all 3 in a mind, body, spirit way in which you were able to kind of start feeling the healing process and not just treating the body or treating the mind, but more looking at them collectively together.
Yep. Yeah. And I think the medical like community is moving towards that. They understand that like life and healing is like a biopsychosocial spiritual thing. Yeah. So it's like the whole continuum. You can't just like give somebody one thing and hope it helps.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic for the future. Like, I think people are smart. They're rational. They're kind of tired of doing the Western paradigm of treatment for things, and they're open to Eastern or, South American, like indigenous approaches. Because like it's not an unconventional medicine. It's the original medicine.
Yeah.
Like doing things like ayahuasca and psilocybin. Like that is the original medicine.
Yeah, they've been doing it for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And I do want to circle back into that because I think there might be some people who have either tried that or are certainly open to exploring it. Maybe they're researching it for themselves.
Yeah.
But I know there might be people on the other side of it who might be unfamiliar with it, might have maybe still some ethical or moral stickiness around the situation and maybe aren't aware of some of the benefits or how it's being used effectively. But before I get there, I do want to circle back on the injury piece. So you mentioned some of these injuries occurred before you actually went to selection. And for those who don't have a military background, Will's referring to Special Forces selection course known as Green Beret. So it's a very highly selected and specialized group of special operators that are within the Army itself. And so you had some injury history before you actually went to selection and went on to become a Green Beret.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so post your time of leaving the military, what did the treatment process look like through the VA? What did your continued treatment look like? And what led you to explore more plant medicine-based experiences for treatment of some of the issues you were experiencing?
Yeah. I didn't really get a whole lot of treatment after I left. Like I we talked about this earlier on the beach, like quickly went from like a very stressful Army career and voluntarily took a very stressful job and worked like part-time for a startup and just kind of burned both ends of the candle and just kind of neglected my health immediately as a civilian. Until I hit a breaking point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I think the Peru trip helped. So yeah, medically, I don't know. I just went to the VA and did like the blood draw where they check your vitals and they're like, you're fine. Like, do you want this flu shot?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. Yeah. Actually, no, I haven't had a flu vaccine in a while, but
yeah.
I don't know. I haven't really done much. I don't take any medications. And I felt like I was kind of okay. Like I was managing the migraines and the back pain to a certain extent, but I wasn't quite at the level of fitness or activeness that I was used to before the injury. And so I was kind of just limping along. Like I would go to yoga, I would swim laps at the Y, I would shoot basketball hoop, like play basketball, like, but that was about it. And then I think after the ayahuasca retreat, I just honestly felt it was such a hard factory reset for my nervous system, for my body. I just started to feel like, oh yeah, like I can get back. A lot of it was mental and emotional and spiritual. So now, like, I mean, it also helps that I relocated to a place where it's easier to be outside and be active. So I'm like walking a lot more, spending more time in the ocean, surfing, doing active things. Got back into running. There's like a run club that meets by our house every week, and I can do that. So yeah, now I feel great. I feel pretty good. Like most of the physical ailments are pretty minimal. My knee is still bothering me, but I tore my ACL at West Point, so it's just kind of a lingering thing. But the other stuff is okay. And feel good.
That's good, man. I hear you on the VA front. This could be frustrating working with them. I think they're certainly trying to do their best, but backlogged and have a lot of efficiency issues. And then certainly, still legal barriers for them, I think, giving probably the most effective treatments for certain causes. And so you've mentioned this trip down to Peru and Heroic Hearts. Like, how did you get connected with them and learn about them? What did you know about, I guess, psychedelic plant medicine prior to taking it, and like what helped you overcome any sort of maybe stigmas or challenges before you jumped in?
Yeah. So I found out about it through my ex. She saw it on social media, like one of the she's a big Bravo fan, and one of the housewives of LA, like her husband was like raving about Heroic Hearts Project and was like trying to raise awareness to like fundraise. And she saw that and was like, hey, there's this free veterans organization that sends people with PTSD to Peru and Mexico, and you can sign up. And so I put my name in the waiting list and didn't hear back for a while and just continued on with my day. Like 9 months later, got the invite to go. And then I was open to it because I had already had like solo journeyed at that point with like psilocybin, and I had read How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan and just heard personal testimonies and just felt the benefit of like the cannabis and different things that I tried where I was like, oh yeah, like I vibe with plant medicine. I don't really vibe. I had tried the VA put me on, or like the Army when I was in, they put me on Zoloft, and obviously like they love to prescribe Percocet.
Yeah.
So like I hated that headspace. I hated being just like a zombie and not having the like actual depth of human emotions when you're on SSRIs. So I was like, I don't want to do that. But I love the idea of plant medicine, and I'd never done it in a ceremonial context. So I just kind of jumped at the opportunity. I also feel like ayahuasca kind of calls you in. Like you feel that very subtle calling from the universe to like go do it. And so I was just open and was on my healing path, like living life, journaling, reflecting, just trying to heal, be a better person, go in therapy. And then got that opportunity in the email, and they needed to know pretty quickly because I was a standby filling in. Actually, for my friend CJ, who he was supposed to go, but he was slotted to go to Peru that retreat and then couldn't because of a grad school obligation. So I got to go in, and it was awesome. Like the second that you like RSVP, you start to feel the medicine working in some ways. It like seeps into your dreams and kind of your consciousness. You start to pick up on like the little messages from the universe. It's almost like you're like tuning your antenna into a different frequency.
Yeah.
Another thing I was going to mention too with the healing is, and why I love doing sound healing, is because when I was in Peru, the curandero, who is the shaman, his name was Rono, and he was explaining how the whole ceremony works and how the history of ayahuasca works with the Shipibo people and their traditions. And he was saying they actually believe that all the healing occurs from the frequencies of the songs that they sing, these icaros. And so the ayahuasca is a gateway to help them like tune their antennas into what like speak the languages of the plants and just a different frequency. And when they sing over you, they're like extracting this energy from you and helping you, almost like make a chiropractic adjustment to your soul. Like your chakras are out on the line, and they're getting you lined up and doing like energetic surgery through their singing. And that just stuck with me because I grew up musical. Like I played guitar and sang in church, and then just like on my own time around like my friends and whatever. And I've always felt such an emotional response at concerts and just when everybody's chanting the same thing or whatever. So I really bought into that. And then like now I do sound healing in the sound bowls. It's all about frequencies. And it was cool too, because like an unintended consequence of the ayahuasca thing is I feel like it really unlocked my creative side again, that like the military had stoked or they had dampened. They were like, we don't care how creative you are. We just color inside the lines, follow the rules, stick to this Excel sheet matrix, timelines, whatever. Very left brain analytical.
Make the PowerPoint nice.
Yeah. PowerPoint. Yeah. And at the end of every ceremony, we did 5 while I was down there. They invited the whole circle of 10 people to sing a song or share a song or poem or whatever. And the first night I couldn't even speak. I was so deep in the medicine. But the next 4 nights I was like, give me a guitar. And I like got the guitar, and in the maloca, like the little hut, like it was pitch black, and you're still kind of like in the medicine. So it's hard to even like start singing or like start playing things. But I have like a few songs that I like totally have locked down from memory, like some Jack Johnson and John Mayer and Dave Matthews songs. So I just like fell back on a few of those and was just ripping it and just singing, and it was so like healing to feel like the music go through me and like unlock that creative side. And now it's like, dude, I love sharing that gift of playing sound bowls, playing the guitar, playing the flute, doing the like, just dude, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And there's something to those vibrations, tenable vibrations,
Yeah.
that like really help like inspire healing.
Yeah.
And that brainwave that we were talking about, the theta brainwave state too. That's another cool thing about sound bowls.
Yeah.
It drops you into this like meditative, deeply restful state of being that's similar to REM sleep. So if you spend, 20, 30 minutes in a sound bath in that state, it's deeply restorative.
The theta wave state, right?
Yeah.
It's not only accessed during like sound healing, sound bowls. That's like basically retuning frequencies throughout the body, right? So trying to create harmony and synergy with different frequencies within your system, right? Yeah. And that also is the same brain state or brain waves one reaches, whether in a meditative state or other forms of somatic healing too, is it?
Yeah. I know for sure it's with sound bath. I also, with the yoga teacher training, they trained us in yoga nidra. So it's like a deep meditative way. If you ever do a yoga sequence at a place in the last 10 minutes or on your back in Shavasana, that's when people will incorporate the yoga nidra. And so it's like kind of like a guided meditation to help you just like slowly, one body part at a time, relax and get you into that like deep state where like your brain and your spirit can start to kind of repair things.
Yeah. I definitely want to dive into the ceremony a little bit more. A lot of what you described sounds very interesting. I think before we get there, though, I want to understand a little bit more about Heroic Hearts as an organization.
Yeah.
Perhaps the founder, where they get some of their funding from. And then how do they navigate, I guess, the legal framework?
The landscape.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to know.
Yeah. Heroic Hearts is so awesome. Shout out.
Yeah.
I just got back from the Psychedelic Science Conference and was sitting at the booth, like repping them all week. And it's so great. But yeah, Jesse Gould started it 2017. He's an Army Ranger and went through kind of a similar healing trajectory and found his way down to Peru at some point and tried ayahuasca and then realized like every veteran needs to try this. Every person that has experienced trauma, and like 95% of the world has experienced trauma. Like being born, it's like traumatic. And then you live in modern day where any given day you're like, is my family safe? Like there's just so many factors, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, like, so yeah, he started that. Since 2017, Heroic Hearts has sent over 1,500 veterans on retreats to mostly Peru and Mexico and now Portland, Oregon. So to navigate the legal landscape, it's completely above water. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, and they operate in countries where plant medicine is legal. It's usually ayahuasca in Peru and Mexico. I think some of the retreats in Mexico might do psilocybin as well. And then in Portland, it's psilocybin. And it's all like with the state. And so hopefully they're going to unroll it into Colorado soon because Colorado is opening up legal psilocybin retreat centers too. And then from the other side of it that is amazing with Heroic Hearts is, it's you might be down there for a week or 2 weeks for the ceremonies, but the whole thing is like a 12-week program for the veteran. And then they do ongoing calls. So they build this community of people, of alumni that stay in touch. And it's one of the biggest things with veterans is isolation. Like you can't replicate, it's hard to replicate that like sense of belonging and mission and purpose that you have when you're in a platoon or on a team and you just have that like brotherhood or sisterhood, that bond, right? That it's hard. And you leave and you're like, can't really relate to anyone when you go back into like the corporate world or like
you start working in finance.
Yeah. You're just like, what?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people just find themselves hanging out in their man cave or like
Yeah.
hanging out, just becoming less social, and it's hard. So that's like an aspect of mental health that I love that Heroic Hearts promotes, the community building. They also work, so they have a sister nonprofit called the Hope Project, and they work together. Like, so same resources, same coaching model where you do, but for both organizations, you do 3 group preparation calls and 3 individual preparation calls with your coach before you go on the retreat. And you do your retreat, and then afterwards 3 group calls and then 3 one-on-one calls with your coach. So for integration. So
Awesome.
a lot of like the coaching and integration and preparation is essentially like unlicensed therapy. Essentially, like you're talking to somebody and you're sharing like, this is what I intend to get out of it. I'm really honing in on like what the purpose is that I want to get out of these things. And then on the back end, it's like, wow, I had these incredible revelations. How do I implement all of the insights and lessons learned into my day-to-day life so that I'm happy and just the most productive person ever? But what I was going to say about Hope Project is it's for spouses. So
awesome. Yeah.
They also do like family members, like Gold Star families, kids. But it's so cool. Like that, and that one, Allison is the spouse of a Navy SEAL, and basically realized like, hey, it's great that we're offering all these things to veterans with combat trauma, but PTSD can be inherited. Like the secondary PTSD is a real thing.
100%.
If you share a bed with your partner and they're sweating at night, having these night terrors, the cortisol that's in their blood is pumping into the environment, and you're affected. Like the vibration of like this energy state over here is affecting you and your kids and everybody, right? Yeah. So healing the whole family is so cool. And I love that both the Heroic Hearts Project and the Hope Project do that together. So it's so sick.
So many incredible things there. I think something I want to point out, you mentioned 1,500 veterans supported through this organization. And so I think for an audience member who might have been unaware or maybe a little bit resistant to the idea of psychedelic as a treatment option or plant medicine, to see that there's an actual legitimate organization established trying to circumvent or navigate the legal framework of this in a reputable way, and doing so much to heal a veteran community that's quite damaged. I mean, some of the stats I was looking up before our conversation, a couple things around suicide, and I'm not quite sure about the number of suicide or the suicide rate across the population as a whole, how much that's increasing. But I will say that veterans make up around 15% of total suicides a year, and we represent less than 1% of the population. And so there's a huge disparity amongst our population that represents the total number of suicides. And then something that's also happened, I looked at suicide rates amongst males in particular compared to females, and it was fairly even for the better part of early 2000s up through about, I think it was like 2017 or 2018. But over the past 5 or 7 years or so, suicide rate amongst men has like almost quadrupled.
Wow.
And so, I don't know. Those are 2 interesting things about suicide rate in particular. And I think you touched on a few of them with the veteran population being like, feeling the sense of brotherhood, leaving that. I think there's also this just the intrinsic mission and feeling like you're doing something so much bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
And those 2 things, that sense of community going away. And so just to know how much suicide affects veterans and to see the type of work and output that this Heroic Hearts program is doing for veterans and giving treatment, like your story. I mean, you were talking about being on, Zoloft, different treatments prescribed through Army treatment, not getting access through the VA. And now, after this experience, being in a state where you're not on any medication, you're feeling great, you're back out doing physical activity, and you feel like to be in such a better headspace. For me, I think people receiving this would have to say, wow, there seems to be something to this experience, whatever's going on here.
Yeah.
And I think that's super cool.
It is. It's encouraging that I think finally the cultural zeitgeist of the moment is latching on to this idea that like anything that works, we should explore. Like stop buying into the old war on drugs narrative and look at these modalities for healing, and having personal testimonies like my own, or like Marcus Luttrell, the congressman, the SEAL, like with his Ibogaine experience, like people in positions in the institutions of power are like listening, and they're like, oh, okay, this is a novel treatment concept. Let's give it a try. Because if you look at Los Angeles, for example, Los Angeles has the highest percentage of unhoused veterans in the country. I got to do a community psychology class last term, and I got to pick a topic to research, and I did unhoused veterans in Los Angeles County. So it's the highest number in the country. Most people come from out of state. So it's kind of like this hub that unhoused veterans go to. And as a result, like, there's a bunch of different things that people are trying to do to help. But in my own personal like experience with the VA out here, I just needed to do therapy. I need to do like 24 sessions of therapy in order to graduate to be a therapist, right? It makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was going to do it through the VA to get it for free. And I called in January, and they were like, okay, the earliest we could get you in with a mental health care professional would be June. And I was like, okay, it's like not bad, 5-6 months. And then they called in May, and they were like, hey, we're booked. Can you do August? So if I was struggling and I needed mental health treatment and needed a therapist, and I went in January, I wouldn't be treated till August. Thankfully, like, I'm okay. And I found a private practice therapist who's awesome.
Yeah.
But like, it's a real crisis, and there's just not a whole lot of options. And so I think what a lot of people are feeling is like, it's almost like if a ship is like capsizing and it's taking on water, and you're like trying the traditional method of like using buckets to get the water out, and then you're like, fuck, dude, like we're sinking.
Yeah.
Like whatever works. Like if you're scooping it out with like trash bags, or like you're summoning the wind to like pull it out, like whatever you have in your arsenal, like bring it out. Because right now, mental health wise, like 44 veterans a day kill themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a low number estimate, because that's just saying like bullet, or too many pills, like overdose. That's not accounting for people who are just so depressed that they drink themselves to death, or they, overuse prescription medications. So it's heartbreaking. And yeah, I just want to do everything. And like, honestly, I got into this work because I was trying to self-soothe. Like I had my own issues where I was, one day, like going through the medical evaluation of whatever at Fort Bragg, and they asked me like, hey, have you felt suicidal or had any suicidal thoughts in the last 2 weeks? And I was honest, and I was like, yeah. And they were like, okay, we need to take you in right now. Like they like went through their checklist. They were like, do you have guns at your house? I'm like, yeah. Do you have like a plan? And I was like, yeah. All these things. And they were like, you have to come with us and do this inpatient rehab. Like you have to go to the psych ward. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm okay. I don't want to actually do it. But like, I do have these impulses and these invasive thoughts. And eventually they were like, okay, well, if you're not going to go into the psych, like the inpatient thing, you can do an outpatient one for 8 weeks, and it's trauma-based. And so I did that. And I'm so glad I did, because that's the first time that I actually wrote down and realized like, yeah, the Afghanistan thing and stuff that came up from that is the most recent manifestation of me having a trauma response. But if you peel the onion back a few layers, there have been multiple times throughout my Army career and my childhood, my teenage years, where I had that same response, where it's like your nervous system goes into fight or flight, and you have that like, whatever.
Yeah.
So doing the work and going down that rabbit hole, like really helped me get down to like the root cause of a lot of stuff. And then doing the, like they had a great lesson where they had a book of 50 different self-care activities. And they were like, just pick one self-care activity per day and do it. And it could be like, listen to your favorite album, take an Epsom salt bath, go for a walk, go for a hike, do yoga, whatever. But it just kind of like reconditioned my thought process, where I was like, oh, I don't have to always be on mission, on guard, at service of others. Like, yeah, I was still active duty, but it's okay to like implement self-care and realize that like the point of living is like to feel comfortable in your body and like enjoy life and be so grateful for this short little vapor that we're here, in this conscious form.
Yeah.
It's a total like paradigm shift.
That's a cool realization to get to. And I'm glad you were able to have that experience.
Yeah.
In setting the foundation of veteran mental health being such an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the access and efficiency of a treatment available to veterans not being readily available or super accessible. I think your analogy of the sinking ship is so spot on. It certainly calls to the relevancy of programs like Heroic Hearts and giving access to veterans to get treatment.
Yeah.
And I guess, can you talk through a little bit about some of the research going into, I guess, validate these novel forms of treatment? And then also, like, what level of effectiveness is Heroic Hearts using to, I guess, validate the success of treatment for those 1,500 veterans that have participated thus far?
Yeah. Yeah. Heroic Hearts is doing a lot of different research things. Like I mentioned, the secondary PTSD with the spouses. Separate from Heroic Hearts, like before any of the psilocybin or ayahuasca research had been done, the VA had done research on ketamine-assisted therapy in treatment-resistant depression and found an 80% efficacy rating. So essentially, veterans with PTSD that weren't responding to Zoloft or other SSRIs stopped taking it, did some ketamine-assisted therapy, and like ameliorated their PTSD symptoms overnight. And that's a cool one because it's like, it's already regulated. You can get prescribed ketamine. They can mail it to your house and you can do ketamine sessions at home with like, supervision remotely. Like there's so many cool options out there. So you don't have to like go to the jungles of Peru if you're not ready, if you're not feeling called to do that.
Right.
But yeah, with Heroic Hearts, like, they're doing a really, really cool 5-year longitudinal study with this group from the UK called Onaya Science. Shout out to Simon and Nige. Really, really cool. They both got into it for similar reasons, just mental health and friends who had their own struggles with suicidality and stuff. But basically, they're doing a lot of different research. So when I was there, pre, during, and post, they had us do surveys that were like psych surveys of like the depression scale or our perception of colors, different like questionnaires. But then the other really fascinating thing that they were looking at was what it does to your gut biome. So they were taking saliva and stool samples and studying that. They were also checking our brainwave activity. So they would hook us up to EEGs and scan our brains during the ceremony and see like what parts of the brain regions were firing off and how it was like synced and related to like the flow of the ceremony and the songs that the shaman was singing. And they're also like their hypothesis is that, okay, so there's this thing called epigenetic inheritance. It's like basically generational trauma. And it's been researched before in lab rats and with humans. If your ancestor, like 7 generations prior, is exposed to a traumatic event, you will feel the ripple effect like 7 generations down. And so one way it expresses itself in your DNA and the way that your DNA expresses itself. So you could have like just migraines or back pain, or you could have like a predisposition to anxiety, things like that. So their hypothesis is that these Shipibo style retreats where you drink ayahuasca and sit in ceremony in a group and do the whole thing actually reverses the way that your DNA expresses itself. And they're measuring that through your saliva. They're like checking your DNA before and after. It's super cool. And so far, I mean, they're year 2.5 or 3 into this. So I was one of the first groups that went down. But the data looks good. And I mean, it's stuff that they assumed, but like, and they're also, the cool thing is that most of the research that they're doing, they're involving the curanderos in the process. So, Rono is one of the facilitators and shamans in Peru, like has his own input. And he's like, I think that we should look into this and this and this. And like, it's a collaborative approach that also honors like the indigenous approach and the people who actually have been practicing plant medicine ceremonies like ayahuasca for thousands of years, rather than just operating in one lens of like the Western paradigm of the way that we do the medical model and we do the scientific method and we honor data and analytics and validate that kind of thing. It's also incorporating the spiritual shamanic aspect of wisdom, where it's like they don't look at numbers and data and things in the same way, and they see the universe in more of like how they describe it sounds like how we describe quantum physics and understanding string theory and the multiverse, that like, these things exist that are beyond our five senses.
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's very, very cool that Heroic Hearts is diving into the research with longitudinal studies partnered with Onaya Science and other organizations. And then I think there will just continue to be more and more data over the years. Like different states are authorizing breakthrough research trials for ibogaine and for psilocybin. The VA is doing their own MDMA assisted therapy study. So yeah, it's great.
It's certainly picking up steam. I think it's becoming more mainstream, more discussed. I think people are becoming more open to it for sure. And that's super positive to hear. I think, I heard something, and I forget where, but it was kind of along the lines of the epigenetic trauma piece. But it was people who have had trauma experiences earlier in life are going to be more susceptible. It was related to PTSD and people with combat exposure in particular.
Yeah,
they're going to be more susceptible to PTSD. And I think people think about trauma as something that's this, very pronounced traumatic event, super severe. And so I think they undersell maybe perhaps some experiences of trauma they had as not being traumatic, because they're relating it to perhaps something super severe or highly traumatic.
Yeah.
But to even think that, generational trauma, as you're discussing, like that's not just a buzzword, right? There's some science you're putting to that and backing up that not only experiences in your early childhood you might not remember, but also your parents and their parents can play a role in your genetic makeup that might make you more susceptible to PTSD or other traumatic experiences. And that, literally by going through an ayahuasca ceremony, you could rework that DNA through the very practices they're undertaking, incorporating music. And that's just all very interesting and enlightening. I had no idea about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it gives me a lot more empathy and self-compassion because, in my own experience, I never had like a super intense like firefight in Afghanistan.
Right.
So in my head, I'm like, well, I never lost a limb. I never had any kind of thing that should be traumatic. But then if you peel it back, like there were definitely times where I had near-death experiences, like, my first halo jump, the parachute didn't open. I had to cut away and pull the reserve, or like had training accident in Fort Carson where a 155 HE round landed like 200 meters from me and my mortar platoon, or like just peeling back, like, oh yeah, my dad like was deployed. My brother's deployed. My grandfather was injured in Korea in the Korean War. My great uncle died on D-Day. Like you peel it back, like you're like, oh yeah, there's this buildup. It's not just like one thing that happened. It's like usually from people, their ancestral trauma is like passed down. And that's just me. Or like even just understanding soldiers. Like when I look back at like some of the soldiers that I served with, they would have these like back pain issues. And we're like, we couldn't really nail down when they got injured because they didn't have like a fall or a car accident or a thing. But if you look at like their childhood or like what their parents went through or their grandparents, it's like, it makes sense. Like it just gives me more of an understanding and compassion for other people and myself, that it's not, it doesn't have, trauma shows up in a variety of ways. And it's so much more complex than just like one incident and that changes your life. Right.
Yeah. This talk about ayahuasca, is something that I just actually with my last guest discussed. And, he talked about the profound experience of it. Mm-hmm. And, certainly you're mentioning a lot of it too, and just having this kind of metaphysical experience.
Yeah.
Right. And, but he did say after, despite having a deeply profound experience and returning home, not integrating the process, it just became an event in isolation that was cool, but that he still kind of went back to reverting to his old ways and stuck in the same community, same setup, doing the same things that ultimately led him to continue down the path of kind of mental health issues, before he realized that, you mentioned Carl Jung earlier, he referenced that as well, kind of doing that shadow work and then stepping into a more complete version of himself. And that's really when he was able to find true healing. And so, you've mentioned a little bit about the community Heroic Hearts is cultivating, and you being part of the integration work, which clearly appears to be so very important. So can you talk about, coming, I guess, the prep work and what actually goes into that leading up to an event or ceremony, and then what is done after the ceremony to really help the veteran integrate that experience and make sure that the change that's felt during the ceremony is long lasting and not just a singular event?
Yeah, preparation and integration is super important. Heroic Hearts has some really good material. They published a book last year called The Veteran's Guide to Psychedelics, and they teamed up with Matt Zeman and Ken Weingart, and they brought in a bunch of other authors and helped collaborate on this book. It's awesome. It's a great resource. It's on Amazon. So that's been helpful. But just spending time like beforehand, preparing, like nailing down, like I was coached to have a theme for each ceremony, like of what I wanted to go into, and then asking questions of the medicine that relate back to a feeling in the body, because the sights and the visions and the things you hear are fleeting, and it's kind of like a dream. Like you'll remember the vibe and the way you felt in the dream, but you won't remember all the details. So that was helpful for me. I was like, okay, I want to explore my spirituality. I want to explore my childhood, my military service, and the next chapter of my life. And the questions that I wrote down for those were like, what does safety feel like in my body? What does unconditional love feel like in my body? What does forgiveness feel like in my body? What would it feel like to pursue a career in mental health? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And sat with those questions and asked those questions of the medicine. And then the feelings that I got, I can sit and meditate and tap back into those feelings in that state of being, like anytime. So it's super cool. It transcends just like the 4 or 5 hour window, and it becomes something that I can fall back on every day. And I think about those ceremonies every day and like those feelings that came up. And then the integration part is, one more thing about preparation too, that's really important, is creating like a feeling of psychological safety within the group. So the more time that you spend as a group on Zoom, understanding each other's background, the better, so that you don't feel like you're going into an environment where you're with strangers. Like, these people. You may not have served with them or been on the same deployments to the same areas, but you understand their story and their intention and just their vibe. So it allows you, especially if you're hyper vigilant, to be like, you know what? I don't have to worry about pulling security mentally in my head. Every little snap in the jungle and the wood line, every little thing in the Maloka that's happening. Like, I trust that like the group is safe and they've got me, so I can lay back and let my guard down. And that allows you to kind of enter into that portal of like profound experiences more readily and more fully than if the variables are all over the place. It's not that you can't, but it's harder to really drop in and get the most out of it. And then on the back end, the integration piece.
Well, I do have a question on the preparation piece, and it relates to diet and medication. And so what does medical screening look like? I'm sure that's an important factor. And then the second piece, are there certain diet protocols or cleansing that people should undertake prior to jumping in?
It's less intense for both the diet and the medications for psilocybin, but it's more intense for ayahuasca. And part of it is just the contraindications that could come up with SSRIs and with MEO inhibitors and the alkaloids that are present in ayahuasca. So that's one thing that Heroic Hearts screens for, and has like a team of doctors and PAs that review people's medications and make sure that they are able to wean off of them over the course of months before they go down there, so they don't have contraindications.
Cool. And then you're about to dive into the post work.
The integration part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think arguably that might be the most important part. And all of us you realize you're investing your time and your resources into this thing. And so you want to get the highest return on your investment possible. And so in order to get the highest return on your investment, it's integrating the lessons learned from those windows of like those ceremonies into your day-to-day life in order to create change and change habits or change destructive thought patterns or limiting beliefs that you have. And so ayahuasca, every like plant medicine and psychedelic substance has a different window, like a golden hour window of neuroplasticity after effect. And ayahuasca is a longer one. So it's like 2 weeks. Ibogaine, I think, is a little bit longer. Some of the shorter ones are like ketamine, it's like 48 hours.
Yeah.
MDMA is pretty short too. But with ayahuasca, so yeah, you have a few weeks of this afterglow period where your brain has like neurogenesis. Like you've created these new neural pathways of like parts of your brain that haven't talked in a long time. And what that does is it allows you to get rid of rigid thought patterns or beliefs that you held previously and different habits. So maybe you are a worrier, or maybe you have control, like OCD tendencies. And afterwards, it's like, you don't feel that at all. And it's this beautiful opportunity to create things intentionally into your life. And so you can start to practice gratitude or start to practice journaling or mindfulness or just healthy living. And like it really sets in, almost like if you had surgery and you reshaped your arm and it's fragile, but it's in a cast for a couple weeks. And so during that time while it's setting, it's like that's the time to set it in the direction that you want.
Yeah.
So integration is that same way. And so like it's really important during the first month when you get back, but it continues. Like it's not like it's 90% complete after a month. It's like integration just is an ongoing thing, right? And it's waves. And it comes and goes with the tide of your life. And it's not like by year 5, I'll be 95% integrated or whatever. Yeah. It's like it comes and goes. And sometimes it feels like you're taking 1 step forward and 3 steps back. And that definitely was my case. Like for a solid year after I came back from Peru, it felt like I was just taking L after L after L.
Yeah.
I mean, went through a divorce, like quit my corporate job, took a huge risk moving out here, trying to figure out what I'm doing. And then just kind of like great piece of advice that I got was like, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to generally know what direction you're going and just take steps every day and make the next best decision for yourself that feels in alignment with your truth, and just keep going in that direction and don't give up. And one day you'll realize like the path is unfolded. And there's this Rumi quote, like Rumi is like the coolest dude ever, this Persian poet. And he was like, as you walk the path unfolds for itself. Mm. So it's like the Indiana Jones movie where he's like taking that walk out and the thing walks out. And like, it's like you have to almost do this trust fall with the universe where you're like, you can't know until you actually like put faith into like whatever it is that you're doing. And as long as you're like in alignment with your truth, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. That's pretty beautiful. I like that. Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like an amazing thing. Clearly the program's doing wonders for veterans. And so that's super exciting to hear. I do feel like with anything, there could be trade-offs, though. Are there blind spots people should be considering, drawbacks, side effects, things that people should be aware of on the flip side of the coin?
Yeah, I think so. I think like you can't view plant medicine and these ayahuasca retreats as like a cure-all or like as an easy button. Like, okay, I'm going to do this in July and then I'll be set. And then I'm going to go on my
going the way
worldwide tour and whatever. Or I'm going to go to this because I know it's going to unlock my creative side and I'm trying to write this book. So I'm going to do this thing and then have the thing like, so that probably is, not great advice to think of it as like a cure-all. Also, like all psychedelic substances bring to surface the things that you have been repressing and not attending to. And so that's where I love Carl Jung's philosophy about shadow, is that everyone has a shadow where you put the unlovable, undesirable things of yourself, parts of yourself in the back burner, and you don't address it, or the traumas, or the whatever, the desires that are undesirable. And so if you've never, some people will say, oh, I want to stay away from psychedelics because I'm afraid I would have a bad trip. And I hear that I can totally understand the protection and like the thought process there, because it is risky that you're going to probably face things. If you've never opened up Pandora's box and looked at your shadow, you might face some things that at first glance could be difficult to sit with, like being reminded of old attachment wounds, or being reminded of like even generational things that didn't even happen to you but happened to your ancestors, because it comes up through your DNA, right? So that can be really heavy, and it can be really hard to sit like the whole, like, I mean, obviously we're talking about the benefits of all this stuff with mental health and holistic health, but the reality of it was that like 50% of the time in all of my ceremonies with the ayahuasca were challenging, like scary, uncomfortable, confusing, and it's type 2 fun. It's like not fun in the moment, but later you're like, wow, what an adventure. So if you are, I would just warn anyone that's thinking like, oh, this is going to be a great time, like this is a bunch of flashing lights and it's trippy and you're going to have these visuals or whatever and feel great. It's not necessarily always like that. Like it can be really, really scary, but so many beautiful lessons are learned there, like how to hold space for the polarity of life, like the yin and the yang, the light and the dark. You can't have joy without sadness. You can't have happiness without pain and loss and suffering. And to hold space with all those things within your own inner universe is beautiful and cathartic. And you learn things. Like for me, it took me like 3 ceremonies before I finally learned that it's okay to ask for help. And like that lesson like makes me choke up now, because like it applies outside of ceremony. Like it's okay to ask for help. Like if you can learn one thing from my story in life, is like, don't just try to like fumble your way through life figuring it out on your own. Because the military like teaches us to be rugged and individual, and there's so much like emphasis on like self-made, doing it on your own. Whatever. And you don't want to be the person that's like asking too much of others and being an inconvenience to others, right?
Bring the team down, right?
Yeah.
Be the weak link.
You don't want to be the slowest person, the weakest link. But in life, like, I mean, there's so many times in the mat where I was just laying on my side in the fetal position, wanting to ask for help. And I couldn't work up the courage to ask for help for some reason, because it was just my pride or whatever. And finally, like just being able to be like, or like they had us turn on the red lens headlight, because like you're so sensitive to light and it's all pitch black at night. So you turn on your little red lens and you're like, help. And then somebody comes over and it's just like, all they had to say, like Armand, who came with us, all he did was just take a knee by me and be like, hey, brother, you're doing great. Hang in there, man. You've got this. I'm so proud of you. And that's all I needed to hear, just to know another human was there. And it's like so many times in life, like I feel like mental health emergencies are like snap decisions are made of violence or self-harm in a time when people feel like there's no way out and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And all they need is a friend or a peer or someone to just be like, hey, brother, I'm here for you. Like, you're doing great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, because that's been a cool lesson, and one that I would just offer to anyone that listens to this podcast and your podcast in the future. And I love, Dan, that like you're doing this, because it's just shedding a light into vulnerable conversations that everyone has these inner dialogues, but people aren't vocalizing it. And like we talked about earlier, like everyone's doing the best they can we're trying to cope and regulate with the tools that we have and the things that we've been taught. But unfortunately, a lot of us come from homes or from, society where we didn't, like, therapy was stigmatized in the military, or we didn't learn about how to regulate your nervous system, or we didn't learn the importance of community. So, and breath work.
Yeah. Well, Will, we've talked about, so much your personal background and dealing with mental health, what you're doing now to help veterans achieve healing and treatment from depression, PTSD. Certainly the work Tenable Vibrations is doing, somatic experiences people could incorporate into their day-to-day to help create space, to help with clarity and purpose and achieve a more healthy way of living. That hopefully someone listening today has gotten a lot out of the podcast and the relevance of psychedelic treatments for depression, PTSD, anxiety. Is there anything you feel like we haven't touched on that we need to, or something that maybe we need to expand upon further?
A couple things, so I think we almost got to it, and it was like, there's this idea around, there was a paper done on Navy SEALs, and they coined this term called operator syndrome, but it applies to anyone that's served in the military, because like basic training in itself and like just the things that you go through in the military are pretty, like, you have all these things, right? This constellation of symptoms created by traumatic brain injury, loss, survivor's guilt, exposure to heavy metals, exposure to blast injury, maybe like a substance addiction, marital issues, sleep issues, sexual performance issues. So all of these things, right? Yeah. They're going on, and they're just like feeding off of each other like a negative whirlwind. And like, it's hard, I think, as you're transitioning out of the military, because you're documenting all the injuries you've ever had and getting it recorded for disability reasons. So as I was doing this, I was like, fuck, I'm like broken. Like, do I have CTE? Like, because I've had so many brain injuries, and I have all these things, and I definitely have all of these things, right? And you start to tell yourself this narrative that like you are broken, that you have PTSD, that you are this.
Becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy
self-fulfilling prophecy narrative of awful, like sad, bleak stuff. And there's a bunch of different theories on therapy, but my favorite one right now is narrative therapy. So it's essentially just crafting a new narrative. And I'm getting the opportunity to go do like a workshop for a few days with this nonprofit called Warrior Side next month in San Diego. It's started by Navy SEAL Diego. He's awesome. And basically it's like helping you craft your own personal story of transformation and drawing on the strengths and the things to create a message of hope. But that's the whole idea with narrative therapy. It's like, hey, I'm not going to tell myself this sad narrative all the time that I am this broken person from this broken childhood or whatever background, like trauma and whatever. It's like, no, actually, like, I'm really strong. I'm really resilient. Like, I'm so stoked for the future, because all of the things that I've experienced have culminated in me being at a point now where I'm able to soothe my own nervous system and teach other people how to do the same for themselves. And I can't wait to see the next chapter of my life and how it plays out. And just creating a message of hope, I think, is so much more helpful for people than just learning like about CBT and being in therapy and being like thoughts, emotions, behavior, like whatever. Like those are practical, but I really think like at a core level, like learning an existential kind of big picture thing where you're like, hey, like everyone relates to stories, right? Like the hero's journey, like you read these old, like you watch Star Wars or like Lord of the Rings, or you read Shakespeare, or you read these old things and you're like, wow, these stories are so impactful. Like we like resonate with stories, right? So that's my thing, is like helping people realize that they have hope because they can rewrite their story at any given time and create like positive change in their life and in the world.
That's incredibly cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of something I just heard. I was listening to a podcast. I think it was Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was talking about kind of what you just alluded to, right? It's like, if you get something hooked in your mind, right, you start reliving a past experience. Your body doesn't delineate present versus the past. And so your own thought and reliving, like you said, documenting certain experiences now puts your body back into the state of that injury. And now you start reliving that experience.
Yeah.
But what he talks about is if you create a new story, just like what you're saying, this new narrative, your body also doesn't know the difference of the future state and the present state. So now you literally, it's not just a mindset. The mindset's important and that helps propel the story, but it literally rewires back into how your body behaves and starts feeling and responding, the hormone makeup within the system, cortisol levels, all the things we've talked about earlier. And I think that's incredibly cool work. And so you're doing that experience here in a couple of weeks?
I'm going to go do the warrior side training to be able to tell my story. And they do it kind of like 10-minute talks. So you can like give up and give a speech. And like, I was so moved by the stories that I heard last week at the Psychedelic Science Conference. Like Noah Galloway, he's one of the guys that I coached, got to go to Peru last year. He was a double amputee, Iraq War. And his story of transformation was so cool. Izzy, another coach with Heroic Hearts, her story, so beautiful. A lot of it was equine therapy. But yeah, everybody has like really cool, everybody has a story to tell, and learning to recraft it into a way that's positive to where you can manifest abundance and peace and all these things is like, that's the coolest. So cool.
Yeah. Send different frequencies out. And start attracting more positive things.
Yeah.
Well, Will, let's go do some yoga and sound baths, man.
Yeah. Thanks, brother.
Yep.
Oh man. Thanks for tuning in today. Very much appreciate you taking the time to listen to my conversation with Will. Really want to thank Will for his authenticity and vulnerability and sharing his story with the audience. And I really just want to reiterate and recap how important it is, the work that Heroic Hearts is doing, really focusing in on how suicide and mental health issues are affecting, veterans disproportionately the rest of society. And, there's a variety of reasons for that. And some of it being due to lack of accessibility and long waits with the VA. And so for me, I think, any alternative options that help get people the care they need and have been proven super effective at treating depression and anxiety and other, trauma and stress related issues should definitely be explored. And so, I've included a link to the Heroic Hearts website in the show notes. If you would want to research more about the organization, please feel free to do so. It was also great getting some time with Will on the beach afterwards, diving into some breath work and sound baths. And I certainly appreciated his thoughts and insights on somatic practices that could help aid with people's health journey. And I think it does tie into where we'll be going next in our following conversation. I'll be sitting down with Mark Gober. Mark is someone who worked in high-end finance and around 8 years ago opted to leave his job and pursue a career in podcasting and also authoring several books. And really his story and his start to what propelled him from corporate work into content creation kind of started in searching, non-traditional medicine options and exploring some things in the health space. That prompted him to do some research and do some digging and really devote a great deal of his time to exploring consciousness, health, quantum physics, and some things that we'll be exploring in the conversation that should be super interesting. And so stay tuned for that episode to drop next month. But until then, please subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or consuming this content on. And follow us on our social accounts, links in the show notes. And until next time, have a good one. Bye.